Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll begin with chapter 8, verse 2. Chapter 8, verse 2. Shem says to Moshe, take Aaron, his sons with him, the special garments of the priests, the special oil of anointment, all these different things to bring to as offerings. And this is basically going to be the dedication of the Kohanim to serve in the Mishkan. Now, it's a very interesting question to ask, when exactly was this going to happen? Or when exactly did this happen? We've already read about the dedication of the Mishkan. We read about the dedication of the Mishkan at the end of the book of Shmos. So we began Vayikra talking about the different laws involving the korbanos that are brought. That, of course, made a lot of sense. But now we're talking about dedicating the Kohanim to what they were going to do. I mean, didn't we take care of that already? Shouldn't we have taken care of that already? So if you look at the Ramban and Pasuk Beis, he starts off citing Rashi. Kakas Aaron, Parshazu Nemra Shivas Yamim Koda Makamas HaMishkan. This parsha was transpired 7 days before the dedication of the Mishkan. So Rashi says that question is absolutely correct, because if you're going to prepare the Kohanim for their tasks, it makes sense to prepare the Kohanim for their tasks before the opening of the Mishkan. And we already read about the opening of the Mishkan. So this was a 7-day process. This happened 7 days before the dedication of the Mishkan, before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Shein Muktam U'Chur B'Torah, Lashon Rashi. So Rashi quotes the famous idea from the Gemara that the Torah is not necessarily written in chronological order. So Rashi says this is a classic example. So this happened before that stuff at the end of Shmos. Says the Ramban, why should we flip around the words of God? If Hashem put it in this order, there must have been a reason why it was in this order. Why should we just freely assume it was out of order? V'od ki tziva b'parshas bayom ha'chodesh harishon b'chol hakamas hamishkan u'revishas Aaron ubanav b'mshichas kulam v'siper sham ma'aseh Moshe b'nyan ha'akama v'lo hizkir b'Aaron ubanav davar ad ha'makam hazeh. So he says there's another difficulty. At the end of Sefer Shmos, the Torah talks about placing the priestly garments on Aaron and his sons. And it doesn't go and talk about the things that we talk about here. So if you said, so the Ramban, first of all, is disinclined to assume it's out of order. That's the first thing. The second thing is, and even if you're okay saying it's out of order, it's so strange because we talk about some aspects of involving the Kohanim in those psukim at the end of Shmos, but we don't talk about all of this. So some of the things were said and some of the things weren't said. It's strange. So Rashi is saying that we're writing things out of order, and also regarding the treatment of the Kohanim, some things are here and some things are there. And why? Why would it be split up that way? Says the Ramban, the instructions given to establish the Mishkan were given on the 23rd of Adar. And Moshe stood up the Mishkan. V'kasher amar Mishkan al ma'amado miyad karlo Hashem yisbarach shu yoshev akruvim v'tzivo so masa korbanos kol ha'parshiyos elu shebetchilas vayikra ad kan. So then, once he stood up the Mishkan, God called to him from his special place in the Ohel Moed, tent of meeting, and he told him all the different halachos involving korbanos that are discussed in these parshiyos here in Sefer Vayikra. Ki ratza l'lamdo masa kol harkabanos u'mishpateihem kodem sheyakriv mehem klal, because God wanted to make Moshe extremely familiar with all of the different korbanos and their laws before any korbanos would be brought. Ki yesh per korbanos hamiluim chatas va'olo shlamim v'lo yudu kol dineim rak min ha'parshos ha'elu sheikdim lo. The Ramban says there's a very technical issue. Some of the offerings brought at the dedication of the Mishkan were things like chatas, ola, and shlamim. In these parshos, we talk about how to do a chatas and an ola and a shlamim. We just say those psukim before, bring a chatas, bring an ola, bring a shlamim. But what does that mean? So the Ramban says that these parshios were taught to Moshe before the dedication of the Mishkan, so that he would know what these things are. V'achar kach amar lo, kach es Aaron v'esponovito, l'zari zoso b'shas maseh. B'amesh amar lo metchila, v'zeh adavar sher taseh lohem l'kadosh yisam l'chaim li. V'hosef lo b'kanves kol edo akel al pesach o moed sheyasem b'amat kulam, sheyedu she'Hashem yisparach b'achar ba'aron u'b'zaro. So part of that discussion was that God tells Moshe, you will, once you know everything you need to know, you will take Aaron and his sons and do X, Y, and Z, like we read about here. V'aderech hayashar nitzdav Moshe b'mlechas hamishkan kodem l'masa ha'egel. Again, the Ramban is touching on an issue that we've discussed before. It's different opinions among the Rishonim. Ramban says that Moshe Rabbeinu was commanded regarding the Mishkan before the story of the golden calf occurred. When God looked favorably upon Moshe, and he assured him that he'd bring his divine presence into their midst. So then Moshe knew that the Mishkan would still exist, that the original instructions of the Mishkan would still be in play despite the sin of the golden calf. And then Moshe in turn conveyed the instructions to the Jewish people. And then after all the work was done, that's where Hashem told him, you should stand up the Moed, the Mishkan. V'sham ne'emar lo v'grafta es Aaron v'es banav v'nei yadash gam Aaron u'banav b'ma'alasam v'chibasam v'nei hamakom v'achshav charzo b'zarzo b'yom rishon sham miluim u'b'shas masa. Okay, so this is a little tricky, but here's what the Ramban is saying. The Ramban is saying that Moshe Rabbeinu knew all of this before the instruction to stand up the Mishkan. Moshe Rabbeinu was told about the Korbanos. Moshe Rabbeinu was told how the Kohanim would be treated. And then when the Rosh Chodesh Nisan came, God says to Moshe, okay, now it's time to bring all of that into action. Now that the Mishkan has been dedicated, now these are the additional things you need to do with Aaron and his sons. So according to the Ramban, all of this is being written in order of what occurred, including, by the way, the instructions of the Mishkan and the golden calf and how that all came down. The only thing the Ramban says that's out of order is the instructions in these parshios were told to Moshe ahead of time, and now God is telling him, now it's time to do these things. Okay, in terms of the dedication of Aaron and his sons. Vine kola parshios kisidra. So according to the, says the Ramban, so now according to all this, everything is written out in order. Ela shehiktim vaychas he'ananas o moed shubayom shmina lemiluim kidas raboseinu l'sader kol inyan hakamas hamishkan. But he first put the cloud covering the Ol Moed that happened the 8th day of the dedication of the Mishkan to sort of clarify that everything is in order. Okay, fine. There's an interesting Orach Chaim over here, Orach Chaim on Pasuk Beis. So again, Rashi says things are written out of order, and that this actually transpired before the dedication of the Mishkan, and Moshe did this before the dedication of the Mishkan. And Ramban says, no, Moshe did it in order. This was after the Mishkan dedication. Okay, Orach Chaim on Pasuk Beis, Kachas Aaron. Parshazu Nemra Kodam Hakamas HaMishkan. This section was said before the dedication of the Mishkan, like Rashi. The Tam Shenem Arkan. So the obvious question to ask, in terms of what Rashi says, is why would God say it out of order? Fine, Rashi says it's possible it's out of order. So Rashi says it is out of order. Okay, but why would God convey it in this way? Lo Merlach, it's to teach you Shekidmu that before Aaron and his sons were formally appointed to serve in the Mishkan, all of the instructions regarding korbanos were already conveyed. Kilasos kulan niskanu hu banav, because he and his sons were dedicated for the sake of all of them. V'lo niskahin ad shalimdo Moshe kol pirtei direi kol hakarbanos. So this is very interesting. So the Ramban says, look, and the Or HaChaim says, look, here's the story. Hashem decided that if you would put all the korbanos into the book of Shmos connected to the Mishkan, Shmos would get very, very, very long. So that didn't make sense. So the korbanos are taught here in Sefer Vayikra. And according to Rashi, and the Or HaChaim says the same thing, the dedication of Aaron and his sons happened really on the timeline. It happened in Sefer Shmos. It happened before the Mishkan was dedicated. The reason why it's written here is the Torah is conveying that before Aaron and his sons were inaugurated as serving in the Mishkan, they needed to be taught all the halachas of the korbanos. Because what does it mean to be a Kohen in the Mishkan? What are those words? They need to understand what it's about. They need to understand what they're signing on to. So to convey that point, that they only were inaugurated once they knew all the halachos, that's why this jumps the normal order of things. So there's a kind of a conceptual level that if they're going to be inaugurated as Kohanim, they must understand what we're talking about. That's one level of it. But there's another point that the Or HaChaim makes. Says, I don't understand. Without that, how in the world are they going to know what to do? They're dedicated as Kohanim. It's time to start. And they're looking around. They don't know anything. So clearly, says the Or HaChaim, they needed to be taught the halachas of these korbanos before they were installed as the Kohanim. Okay. Verse 4. Vayas Moshe kasher tzivu Hashem. So Moshe did as God commanded him. Vatikohel hoido Pesach ol moed. And the people gathered by the entrance of the Ol Moed. It's an interesting verse because at the beginning of verse 3, God told Moshe to gather the people at the opening of the tent of meeting. So it says Moshe did what God said. Wouldn't that naturally include gathering the people? But then it has to talk about the gathering of the people, and it doesn't say that Moshe gathered them. It said the people just became gathered. What's going on with this pasuk? Or HaChaim on pasuk Dalet. V'tikohel hoida. Ulai ki birosa masa Moshe shalakach Aaron ubanav habegadim nikalu me'atzman. This is kind of a neat thing to think about. The Or HaChaim says maybe the pshat is that when Moshe saw that, the people saw that Moshe was gathering together Aaron and his sons and the garments, they realized there was something big about to happen, so that they didn't have to be gathered by Moshe. They came on their own. O Yirtzelodia, or the intent is, Shechzikam Hamakom L'chol Yisrael BePesach Ol Moed. Or the intention is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what the reason it says they were gathered is miraculously God made it that the entire Jewish people were able to fit in right by the entry of the Ol Moed. So we have the dispute between Rashi and the Ramban regarding when on the timeline the inauguration of the Kohanim occurred. We also had an Or HaChaim commenting on that matter. Now we have the Or HaChaim talking about what does it mean that the people were gathered by the opening of the Ol Moed. I want to remind everyone we're not going to meet tomorrow. We're not going to meet per morning, God willing, and God willing, we will meet Friday morning.